probably already know that colostrum is the first step in starting calves off right. But what are the other factors that come into play? Welcome to Beyond Colostrum, the show where we'll talk about how to optimize your calves with science and research that goes beyond just colostrum. We'll challenge the ways you typically manage your calves, and you might learn some new concepts beyond what you're already used to. Thanks for joining us as we go beyond colostrum.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you, Dr. Travis and Dr. Mike, for joining us again for another episode of Beyond Colostrum. I'm Juliana Langmeyer, and I'm going to host this discussion today. But I kind of want to recap first on our last episode of Beyond Colostrum. We kind of covered what do you need to prepare for calving season. So what should you have in that calving kit? So if you haven't seen that episode, go ahead, check that one out on our YouTube channel. But today we're going to dive a little farther on that preparation, and we're going to talk about what do you need to do to set up your maternity pen effectively. So Mike, why do you think it's so important for producers to make sure that they have a strategic maternity pen?
Yeah, I think that, the maternity pen serves, I think everybody knows that it's where the calving is going to happen, whether it's beef or dairy. The thing about it is that process is, it's a big process. It's really everything. And, we consider things like dystocia or difficult pulls, ways in which cows calve, all of that is, the setup is going to play a big role in making that process as smooth as possible. And it's going to have impacts on calf health and cow well-being as well as our own well-being in terms of sanity of trying to assist or even just monitoring that whole process, because it is such an important piece.
Absolutely. Yeah, calving season can be a stressful time. So making sure that we have everything kind of working for us and not against us is so important, right? Yeah. So Travis, do you want to explain a little bit when it comes to that maternity pen setup? Is there anything specifically when it comes to equipment that you would maybe recommend to have set up or to have around near the maternity pen?
Yeah, a lot of this goes back to our previous podcast, right? So what equipment do we need in our calving kit? So having that calving kit readily accessible close to our maternity pen, I think, is important. Beyond that, having some kind of a chute or immobility device where we can put the cow in. Ideally, that would have sides that would open up in case you have a cow go down or we have to do a C-section. We'd be able to swing the left side open and be able to gain access to the cow that way. In our cow calf setups, we probably need to have some kind of a crowd gate or a crowd pen behind that chute, because oftentimes they're not going to be real keen on going into that chute. So we got to have some way to get them into the chute. And then once we have them secured, again, those sides need to open up so we have easy access to the cow. We can assist in labor and delivery as needed. And then, like I said, if we have to do a C-section, we have access to the left side of the animal. And then again, it'd be nice to have a water source close by, so that as we need to clean the cow before we enter vaginally. We need to remove any manure and things like that. So having some kind of a water source so that we can get that accomplished, I think, is key. If you have hot water available, again, if we have to administer colostrum or something like that, then we have a hot water source that's readily available as well. So again, a lot of that goes back to the previous podcast as what do I need when calving comes, and then, of course, some kind of a chute to hold those animals secure.
Yeah, not just having those supplies, but having them close by.
Yeah, where are they at? Are they accessible, right?
Right. And are you having to climb over certain gates to get there, or is it in your pickup that's maybe a ways away? And yeah, just making sure that you have them. That's something that we don't always think about. Another thing that we maybe don't think about is that pen or that maternity area or the calving area where we're maybe bringing some cows into when they're getting close. Does it matter how big that pen is? Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about how square footage maybe does impact a cow when she's about to calve?
Yeah. So it's kind of nice. So both on the beef and the dairy side of things, the number is actually quite similar. And that number is 150 square feet per cow. So, we have actually done studies historically looking at dystocia rate, and that is reflective. It will go higher, your dystocia rate, if let's say you're too crowded. Okay. And that's a tough thing to say. Why? Especially if we're thinking about upper Midwest weather, where we like to cram cows into buildings. And depending on the disposition and breed of your cow, that's going to have an impact as well on some of that. Do I see people get below that number in really cold weather and do okay? Yes. But 150 square feet is ideal. And so that's kind of where you want to be when you're considering calving. The other thing about calving we have to remember is that it's in a natural setting, especially we see this on the beef cow calf side, is first calf heifers or cows tend to leave the herd, and they walk. It's an exercise, and so that kind of provides a basis for how their behavior is going to be when they calve. I know personally, having a cow calf operation that I own and with my brother, we used to try to pen cows up in 10 by 10 pens, and we definitely were able to see with some cows that they would try to get out or they felt too contained in that sense. And so I think a 10 by 10 is too small. And again, if you follow that 150 square feet per cow, that's going to work. That's also going to be, if let's say many beef cow calf producers have heard of these new hoop beef systems. That's typically the minimum square footage that you want in those systems anyway. So beef and dairy, we want to be at 150 square feet per animal. And that's again because cows have a tendency to want to get away from one another, for one. Two, and we'll talk about this, but they also you don't want to get a lot of manure built up. We want clean calving in that. So that kind of ensures that from both angles at 150 square feet per cow.
So speaking of that, though, to try to keep that pen clean, what do you recommend for bedding to try to keep that bedded so it's warm, but yet it's clean and easy to clean out? What do you recommend for bedding?
Yeah, so I think it's going to depend on where you're at in geography type things, but you go down into California, for example, they've got rice hulls and different types of byproducts. Really, you just want a bedding that it's maybe has the ability to soak up, obviously, fecal matter and urine. Personally, my personal opinion is I like straw because it also decomposes differently in that pen than, for example, corn stalks. And we use both. But in our calving barn, we go and get straw. In fact, I'm in Minnesota. I don't have a lot of access to straw, but I make sure I get some source because I really like that product. Some guys using bean stubble. Some guys are using, like I said, corn stalks. So, I think the biggest thing is you gotta find what works for you in your system, and depending too on the labor in which you have to disperse that, whether it's in a big square or a round bale, or if you have a hay buster, all those things have to be considered. And I think the biggest thing from it though is using the knee test, as I say. So what I mean by that is if you can go in that maternity pen and you can knelt down with your knees and not get wet, that's what it should be like. If you're starting to see fecal material build up on the udder, the maternity pen's getting to, needs to be cleaned. We know as well that data has shown that cows coming into calving starting as early as 12 to 14 days prior to calving and going 3 days post calving, they will shed on the average 4 to 7 logs more of bad bacteria like E. coli and salmonella in their feces. So we got to keep things clean. We know that affects passive transfer. So yeah, it's the idea is we want to get that dry for one, and two, clean it enough times to make sure that it stays clean.
Okay, now I have to ask, just as kind of a rule of thumb, and you guys can both give your 2 cents on this, but if you notice that calving pen is maybe a little bit wet, do you just rebed it, or do you clean it out entirely and then rebed, or what do you guys think?
My personal opinion is the more often we can clean it, the better. You know, the more often we can scrape out any dirty material and get rid of it. Now, if we run into labor issues and rebedding on top is our only option, that's still better than doing nothing. But in a perfect world, we would have enough labor that we could clean that maternity pen out routinely. You know, especially, you know, if we're fully stocked or even overstocked, then it may mean we're cleaning it daily. You know. So in some situations where maybe we're a little understocked and we have plenty of space, then we can get by with several days in between cleanings. But I'm a big fan of more is better, right? So the more cleaning opportunities and disinfecting opportunities we can get. You know, the thing we have to remember is as soon as that calf's muzzle is exposed to this new world, it starts intaking pathogens. It starts being exposed to all the different pathogens that are on our farm. So even during the calving process, you know, as we're pulling a calf or assisting, if that cow defecates and it gets in the mouth of that calf, it's already been exposed to some pathogens. And same with our maternity area. If that calf is being born in a dirty environment, it's going to be picking up more pathogens from an earlier point in life. So the cleaner we can have it, the better. The other thing I'd like to add to that too is, you know, our true calving area, like if we have a chute or something like that where we're going to assist with labor, then that area needs to be able to be washed down after every calving, right? So we need to be able to spray that down and disinfect it. So having that on a concrete slab with a drain or something. So again, we can wash any material down prior to the next calving is important as well.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, what do you think? Rebed, clean out. What are your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, totally agree with Travis. I mean, you know, I get it though. There's a lot of it really does come down to stocking density and labor. You know, and it also depends as well. And we learned this, my brother and I this year, we had heated part of our calving barn. And when you are able to control the heat and get it up to even, you know, 40, 50 degrees in there, what we learned was that the level of bedding material that correlated pretty easily with the humidity in that barn as well. So, you know, as you stack, you know, bedding on top of bedding, and the more of a contained space you have to realize as well that that's going to correlate pretty well with the amount of when the temperature gets right in there, that moisture underneath has to go somewhere, and sometimes that comes through. And so, you know, that's going to play a role as well. So again, my preference would be clean it out. And we've had to do that with our calving facility. The other thing is that, you know, if you do clean it out, you also realize that you are exposing a lot of pathogens that have built up in there. You know, there are some products that you can use. There's some powders. There's a Stalosan product out there that you can spread out on top of that. There's lime. You know, I'm not getting into particular products in that. There's also some spray foam, not spray foam, but ways that you can actually kind of wash down with chemical certain areas when it gets contaminated. And that's probably, that should probably be done if you do clean an area out, you know. or at least if you're going to clean it out, you better get a good thick layer of bedding over the top of it. So.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think sometimes when you're in an indoor setting, you wait for a nice day that you can open up everything, go in, clean it out. But you can always tell if you walk into a calving barn and your eyes start watering right away when you walk in, yeah, it's time to get that barn cleaned out.
Yeah.
That, and maybe go through, as soon as that calf hits the ground, do you leave that pair in the maternity pen, or what do you do? What should a timeline kind of look like as soon as that calf's born?
Yeah, again, this is going to differ slightly between beef and dairy. You know, again, on dairy operations, hopefully that calf is born and they're immediately taking it away and putting it in a different calf pen, again, that's routinely cleaned, disinfected, doesn't have a lot of fecal buildup. But they're going to remove that calf from the maternity pen in a fairly timely fashion. On the cow-calf side of things, you know, we want the calf to be licked off and mom and calf to be well bonded together. We want to leave them ample opportunity to ingest colostrum, hopefully be dried off before we put them out into the elements, things like that. And so, you know, I typically will tell guys to wait about 24 hours before they move them out, again, just to make sure that cow and calf are well bonded together. You know, we can over manage cows too, right? So we've seen this scenario where the calf is born and within 2 hours we move it into a different pen, and then by 6 hours we're kicking it out onto pasture, and that calf never has time to, there doesn't have enough energy because it's constantly moving. It never has enough energy to actually intake colostrum. And so we've got to leave that pair alone long enough for that calf to again, get dried off, ingest an adequate amount of colostrum prior to us kicking them out of the barn.
Absolutely. It's this sweet balance, right, of being able to manage them closely enough, intervene when we need to, but still kind of letting Mother Nature take its course as well. Mike, what would you then say to someone that maybe doesn't intervene very much with their pairs or with their cows when they're about to calve, and maybe just does everything out on pasture? What would you say to someone like that, and what would you recommend when it comes to having eyes on those cows and being ready to intervene?
Yeah, a very good question. I think there's some advantages to obviously calving out on pasture and that. When we look at the rate of failure passive transfer with calves in the industry, on a national average, it's been reported, and this is multiple farms and NOMS data, that beef cow calf in the beef cow calf enterprise, approximately 30% of calves fail passive transfer. And that can happen for a multitude of reasons, right? There's cow factors, you know, there's dystocia or difficult pulling that can go on. There's calf factors as well, meaning calf didn't get up and suckle the dam in time. And for the most part, you know, these calves, if cows got good udders, good udder quality, you know, they get up and they do their job and they get their colostrum. But, you know, 30% is somewhat concerning, given that bovine respiratory disease complex is one of the most costly things in the industry. And that's $1 billion industry every year, and it really hasn't changed. And so you look at a lot of these calves in the beef side that come from pasture settings, and there's opportunity there. There's probably one of the biggest opportunities is to monitor what's going on during that process. And so we can take that number down. I would argue, you know, even getting that, the goal on the dairy side is to get it below 10%. And we're, you know, 3 times that size in the beef cow calf side of things. So, you know, I think one illustration of this is a couple years back, I had a producer that attended a cow calf meeting where we discussed maternity use and also intervening with colostrum and dystocia and that kind of thing. And he was a feedlot operator, and he was in his 80s. And he said, you know, I didn't really get a lot out of this in terms of trying to apply some of these things in terms of intensive managing, you know, the pair. But he says, what I will say is, as a feedlot owner, over the last 30 years, was able to find a source farm that out in Montana where his calves had from a feed efficiency side of things, done much better than the other two sources he historically had gotten. And the key part of it was after, he kind of attended that talk, was that those guys out there actually have a maternity barn in Montana where they pair those cows up for the first 24 hours. And so, I think there's a lot of opportunity to get there. And yes, you'd say, well, how do we do that? We've got feeding and everything else to do. Well, we're selling pounds of calves. And if we got 30% of our calves failing and there's upwards of a 50% drop in feed efficiency in those animals, that's some opportunity there that we can, go to intervene when necessary and have some efficacy and draw, dollars to our bottom line for doing that effort, so you would think that rate of failure passive transfer would actually be better in the beef cow calf, because you'd say, hey, natural selection should be selecting for animals that don't allow this to happen, but that's not the case. And therein, there's opportunity to monitor our calving and maternity areas even while on pasture. And this kind of segues into another nice tool is, with new technology now, a lot of people ask about these calving cameras. And I've personally invested in one of those. I've had multiple clients that I've worked with now invest in those. And they are all outstanding tools now. And we can use them both in pasture type settings and in our intensely closely confined areas to kind of keep eyes on things. And so I would recommend, if you do get a camera, you got to get one that you got to have good internet for one. And number two, you need to be able to zoom in with it and have clarity so you can even identify down to the tag. And so those cost a little bit more, but they're well worth it. And I would say majority of everybody that I've asked that have invested in cameras for those areas, that they're well worth it. I know I would guarantee we paid for that system right away this year within 1 year. So
yeah, one other thing with those cameras is making sure that barn stays dry. As soon as that barn gets a little bit of humidity, that camera can fog up pretty quick. But such good points. I mean, every producer has their own challenges during calving season, but doing what you can from a preparation standpoint is all that you can do, right? Being prepared, making sure that you have the supplies that you need on hand, and have a plan, right? Have what you have kind of for a maternity pen setup, or have a plan if you are going to calve out on pasture on being able to have eyes on those calves so that you can intervene when you need to. Travis, do you want to close us off or send us off with any words of encouragement for anyone that might be starting calving season, or even if they're in the thick of calving season, just some words of encouragement for those who are out there calving?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that it's a stressful time of year. We know that everybody's running on lack of sleep because, especially in my neck of the woods, we're calving on pasture and they're driving out every hour or two to check cows all night long. And then they have a dystocia or something, and that kind of throws a wrench into their sleeping pattern. And, we're here for you guys. We're here to help you raise happier, healthier calves. And we understand the challenges that come. A lot of our recommendations, again, they're based on sound science, but at the end of the day, what can you accomplish on your operation? And just look for opportunities to improve your maternity area without, taking too much time out of your busy day.
Well, thank you both so much, Mike and Travis, for your input on how they can successfully set up a maternity area. And again, for your own experiences and sharing those with us so that we can ultimately have a happier calving season with a little less headache. So thank you both. And to everyone watching, we hope that you have a successful, happy calving season. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching today's show. If you have questions about something you heard today, or maybe you have a topic you'd like us to address, leave us a message on Facebook. We'll talk again on Beyond Colostrum.